Hello guys, welcome to Phoenix What If. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto awakened the power of nine-tailed fox god and got married with Yoruichi? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Unfurling. The world was ending in dust and shadows. Cracked earth spider-webbed for miles in every direction, a testament to a power that broke worlds. The sky, choked with a sickly gray haze, was occasionally rent by flashes of purple lightning from Sasuke's Susanoo or the blinding impact of a truth-seeking orb. For the men and women of the allied shinobi forces, it was a landscape of futility. They were ants scrabbling at the feet of gods, their most powerful jutsu evaporating like morning mist against the casual might of Madara Uchiha. Sakura Haruno felt the tremors of each impact in her bones. But her world had shrunk to the space of a few feet. Her hands, glowing with the emerald light of her medical ninjutsu, hovered desperately over Naruto's chest. The light flickered, unstable and weak. It wasn't her chakra that was failing, it was the life force beneath her palms. It was guttering out like a candle flame in a hurricane. "Don't you dare, Naruto," she whispered, her voice raw and cracking. Tears streamed down her face, carving clean paths through the grime and blood caking her cheeks. "Don't you dare give up." His chest was still. The steady, indomitable rhythm that had been the background music to their lives for so long was gone. His skin was cold, his signature sun-bright chakra signature almost completely extinguished. She was pouring her own life into a vessel that was already shattered beyond repair. Nearby, Gaara watched, his face a mask of grim despair. The sand that had carried Naruto's body to them pooled uselessly at his feet. A monstrous crash shook the ground, and Sakura risked a glance over her shoulder. Sasuke's perfect Susanoo, a towering construct of violet chakra that had seemed invincible only hours ago, now had a massive, gaping hole in its torso. It flickered, threatening to dissolve as its wielder was pushed past every conceivable limit. Standing opposite him, floating with an air of absolute tranquility, was Madara Uchiha. He was no longer a man. He was a myth given flesh, the sage of six paths reborn. His white robes were pristine, his bearing serene, as if he were merely observing a mildly interesting painting rather than presiding over the annihilation of an army. "Your friend is dead, Sasuke Uchiha," Madara's voice echoed across the battlefield, calm and clear, cutting through the din of the few remaining skirmishes. "The Nine Tails has been extracted. It is over. Surrender and accept the infinite Tsukuyomi. Grant yourself a perfect world, free from this pointless struggle." Sasuke grunted, forcing the Susanoo to solidify. "I'd rather die in a real world than live in one of your pathetic dreams." He thrust a hand forward, and the ethereal warrior mimicked the motion, launching a jagged Amaterasu-infused arrow. Madara didn't even move. He simply raised one of his black receiver rods, and the inextinguishable black flames were absorbed into it, vanishing without a trace. Such conviction, he mused, a flicker of something akin to pity in his Rinnegan eyes. Wasted on a flawed reality. He drifted forward, one slow, deliberate step at a time. The remaining shinobi tensed, a wave of pure terror washing over them. They had thrown everything at him. They had watched Cage fall, legends die, and hope crumble. Inside the silent ruin of Naruto's mindscape, a different kind of ending was playing out. The familiar sewer tunnels were bone dry. The pipes cracked and crumbling. The great cage that had once held the nine-tailed fox was rent open, its bars twisted and broken. And before it, on the cold, damp floor, lay Kurama. The colossal fox was a shadow of his former self. His vibrant, malevolent red-orange fur was dull and faded, his body translucent. He was disappearing, his chakra ripped from the mortal coil by Madara's Gedo Mazo. Naruto's own spirit form flickered beside the fox's massive head, equally ephemeral. "It seems this is it, Kit," Kurama's voice rumbled, not with its usual thunderous arrogance, but with a quiet, weary resignation. "He has us. He has me." Naruto looked at the dying Biju, the source of so much of his life's pain and, in the end, his greatest strength and truest friend. There was no anger, no resentment. Only a profound sadness. "We failed." "Perhaps not," Kurama said, his great eyes swiveling to meet Naruto's gaze. A strange, Ancient light flickered within that crimson-slit pupil. There is one last thing. A gamble that makes all others look sane. A technique forbidden even among the Biju. It is not a jutsu. It is an act of genesis. A fusion of not just our chakra, but our very souls. Our existence. What would it do? Naruto asked, his spiritual voice faint. I do not know for certain, the fox admitted, a rare and startling confession. The legend says it forces an evolution. That the combined soul of a mortal vessel and a Biju can ignite a spark of what came before. The original power. But the cost is absolute. It will either elevate us to song, eating beyond man or Biju, or it will incinerate our souls, erasing us from all cycles of life and death. We will simply cease to be. Naruto looked at the fading form of his partner. He thought of Sakura, her desperate, frantic healing. He thought of Sasuke, fighting alone against a god. He thought of his father's final smile, his mother's love, Jiraiya's faith, Kakashi's guidance. All of it, of it for nothing if he faded away here. They had always been a team, a mismatched pair bound by fate. It was only fitting they face the end the same way. Do it, Naruto said, his voice now imbued with a sliver of its old steel. A faint, grim smile touched the giant fox's muzzle. I thought you might say that. Brace yourself, Naruto. This will be the end, or a beginning unlike any other. Kurama's fading form began to glow, a deep, primal red. He dissolved into a swirling torrent of pure energy, not chakra as a shinobi would know it, but something older, wilder. The life essence of a being born from the primordial Jubi. This torrent surged into Naruto's flickering spirit, which erupted in a corresponding blaze of brilliant, pure gold. The two colors, red and gold, slammed together. For a moment, there was only an agonizing, silent scream that echoed in the space where souls resided. The two identities, Naruto Uzumaki and the nine-tailed fox, fought, merged, and broke against each other. It was the pain of a star being born and a universe dying, all at once. Then, there was only light. On the battlefield, Sakura screamed as Naruto's body suddenly arched upward, a blinding, gold light erupting from the seal on his stomach. It wasn't the violent, angry red of Kurama's cloak. This was different. It was pure, radiant, and impossibly powerful. It was not the light of a jutsu, it was the light of creation. The light expanded in a perfect sphere, silent and serene. It didn't destroy, it changed. The dust and debris were pushed back, not by a shockwave, but by a gentle, irresistible pressure. The sickly gray sky was washed clean, revealing the stark, uncaring moon above. The very air grew thick, heavy with an energy that made every shinobi, from the weakest genin to Sasuke himself, fall to their knees, gasping. It wasn't chakra, it was something else, a pressure that pressed down on their very souls, demanding reverence. Madara stopped his advance, his eternal calm finally cracking. His Rinnegan widened as he stared at the source of the light. He could feel it, the raw, untamed energy of the world itself, the kind of power he had only felt when communing with the husk of the 10 tails. But this was different. It was alive. It was conscious. The golden sphere of light pulsed once, then receded, flowing back into Naruto's body. He floated into the air, his limbs limp for a moment before he slowly straightened, standing unsupported in the night sky. He was transformed. His familiar orange and black jumpsuit was gone, seemingly burned away and replaced by a simple, form-fitting black undersuit. Over it, a flowing golden haori materialized, its tails ending in 9 separate, flame-like tips. The whisker marks on his cheeks were no longer simple lines, they were elegant, sharp-edged markings that glowed with a soft, internal light. His blonde hair was a shade brighter, seeming to float around his head as if underwater. But it was his eyes that held the most profound change. They were still blue, but it was the impossible, depthless blue of the deepest ocean trench, and within them, the pupils were now slitted, like a fox's, but they glowed with the golden light of a newborn star. And behind him, swaying with a gentle, hypnotic grace, were 9 immense, ethereal tails. They were not made of flesh or chakra, but of the same pure, golden energy that had remade the battlefield. Each one a river of raw, divine power. He tilted his head, his gaze sweeping over the ravaged landscape. There was no anger in his expression, no sadness, only a serene, ancient calm. as if he were seeing the world for the first time, and the last. His eyes finally settled on Madara. Madara Uchiha, the man who had brought the world to its knees, the self-proclaimed savior of reality. Felt a sensation he had not experienced in over a century. Fear. It was a cold, unfamiliar viper coiling in his gut. This was not the Naruto he had fought. This was not a Jinchuriki. This was an ascension. He had sought to become a god through meticulous planning and stolen power. This boy, this failure, had seemingly stumbled into true divinity by accident. It was a cosmic insult. What are you? Madara breathed, the question torn from him against his will. Naruto didn't answer. He simply raised a hand. Far, far away, in a place that existed outside the normal flow of time and space. A woman stretched languidly on a rooftop. The Seraite of Soul Society was a place of eternal, unchanging order, and for Yoruichi Shihoin, that order had become monumentally boring. Centuries of peace had made the Gote 13 complacent, their blades gathering dust and their politics growing ever more tedious. She missed the thrill of a real challenge, the electric crackle of a power that could shake the foundations of reality. She was just contemplating a trip to the world of the living to tease Kazuki when she felt it. It started as a faint tremor, not in the ground, but in the very fabric of existence. It was like a single, perfectly played note on an instrument the size of a universe. Her senses, honed by centuries of combat and a mastery of shunpo that bordered on prescience, immediately locked onto it. Most Shinigami would not have even registered the disturbance. But Yoruichi could feel the texture of the realms. This was a new thread being woven into the tapestry, one mad of an energy she had never encountered before. It was impossibly vast. It dwarfed the Ryutsu of the Captain Commander. It made the raw power of the Hogyoku seem like a child's toy. And it was a bizarre, paradoxical fusion of mortal vitality and something else, something far, far older. A slow, predatory grin spread across her face, the first genuine smile she'd had in decades. Her golden eyes gleamed with renewed excitement. Well now, she purred to the empty air. What have we here? Without a second thought, she gathered her own formidable Ryutsu. She didn't open a Senkaimon gate. That was too slow, too formal. Instead, she focused on the source of that titanic energy, on the tear in the worlds it had inadvertently created. She manipulated the space around her, bending it, folding it, until the distance between the Seraite and that war-torn patch of earth in another dimension became a single step. She pushed through the barrier, the transition as smooth as slipping through a silk curtain. Yoruichi emerged onto a jagged cliff overlooking the battlefield. The air was thick with the strange, divine energy, and it tasted like ozone and sunlight. Her eyes, accustomed to seeing the flow of spiritual particles, took in the scene at a glance. The kneeling army, the terrified god wannabe in white robes, the shattered chakra construct, and at the center of it all, the source. The young man bathed in gold. She watched, her interest piqued, as the white-robed man, Madara, decided that offense was the only sane response to the unknown. He brought his hands together, his face a mask of furious concentration. You may have changed, but you are still just a boy. I am the master of this world. I will show you the power of a true god. Tengai Shinsei. He unleashed his ultimate jutsu. High above, the newly cleared sky darkened once more. Not with clouds, but with a shadow that blotted out the stars. A meteorite, impossibly large, wreathed in atmospheric fire, descended from the heavens. It was a world-ending attack, a demonstration of power so absolute it was meant to crush not just the body, but the spirit. The shinobi below cried out in despair. Sasuke, his Rinnegan wide, prepared to teleport himself and his teammates away, knowing he could not stop it. Naruto, however, simply watched its descent, his expression unchanged. He raised his left hand, palm up, towards the falling mountain of rock and flame. He made no sign, spoke no incantation. A sphere of pure, compressed golden energy, no larger than a fist, formed above his palm. It shot upward, not with explosive speed, but with a serene, undeniable purpose. It was not an attack. It was a declaration. The tiny golden sphere met the colossal meteorite in the upper atmosphere. There was no explosion, no cataclysmic boom. The meteorite, the continent-shattering power of Madara's Rinnegan, simply dissolved. It broke down into its base components, molecule by molecule, atom by atom. The rock, the fire, the sheer kinetic force, all of it was unmade in an instant, turning into a silent, shimmering shower of harmless golden particles that drifted down onto the battlefield like a gentle snowfall. The silence that followed was more profound than any sound. It was the silence of shattered paradigms, of laws of nature being rewritten on a whim. Madara stared, his mouth slightly agape. All his power, all his planning, undone with a gesture. He had treated his enemies like insects. Now, he was the insect. Naruto lowered his hand. His 9 golden tails swished lazily behind him, the only movement in the frozen tableau. His voice, when he finally spoke, was not the loud, boisterous yell everyone knew. It was a calm, resonant tenor, layered with the ancient, rumbling bass of the being he had merged with. It was the voice of a king and a beast, a savior and a force of nature. It's over, Madara. On the cliff, Yoruichi Shihoin leaned forward, resting her chin on her hand, a genuinely amused and deeply intrigued glint in her golden eyes. She took in the sight of the golden-tailed god, the dumbfounded pretender, and the broken world around them. This was infinitely better than another boring day in the Seraite. Well now, she murmured, her voice a low, excited purr that was lost in the wind. This looks like fun. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. A God's First Steps. The silence on the battlefield stretched, thin and taut, ready to snap. Every eye was locked on the golden figure in the sky and the pale, shaken man who had, only moments ago, been their god. The shimmering, harmless motes of what was once a meteorite continued their gentle descent, a silent testament to an impossible act. Madara Uchiha's mind, a fortress of strategy and centuries of experience, was failing him. He cycled through every possibility, every jutsu, every contingency he had ever conceived. None of them accounted for this. This wasn't the power of a tailed beast, nor was it the 6-path senjutsu he now wielded. This was something primordial, something fundamental. It was the power to decide what was real. He would not be undone by a boy's fluke. You think a single trick makes you a god? Madara snarled, the fear transmuting into familiar, comfortable rage. He thrust his hands forward, and from his palms erupted a torrent of black lightning, the sage art, Yin Release Thunder Blast. It was a jutsu that attacked not just the body, but the spiritual core. It was absolute. The jagged, chaotic bolts of energy screamed across the distance, converging on Naruto's calm form. Naruto did not erect a barrier or dodge. He simply lifted his right hand and clenched his fist. The black lightning stopped dead in the air, a dozen feet from his body. It froze, crackling and spitting, held in place by an invisible, inexorable will. The storm of spiritual destruction was reduced to a static work of art. Naruto tilted his head, studying it with a detached curiosity, as if observing a new species of insect. Then, with a flick of his wrist, he dismissed it. The lightning didn't explode or dissipate, it simply ceased to exist, vanishing from reality as if it had never been thrown. Your power is borrowed, Madara, Naruto's voice echoed, carrying across the field without the need for shouting. You stole it from the first Hokage. You stole it from the Jubi. It is a hollow, brittle thing. With an almost imperceptible shift in his posture, Naruto closed the distance between them. He didn't use a flicker technique. He simply wasn't there, and then he was, standing directly in front of Madara, his feet now resting lightly on the cracked earth. His 9 golden tails billowed slowly behind him, bathing the Uchiha in their ethereal light. Madara reacted on pure instinct, his body screaming at him to move. He swung his truth-seeking staff, a weapon that could disintegrate anything it touched into dust, directly at Naruto's head. Naruto caught it. He caught the uncatchable weapon in his bare hand, his fingers closing around the black, formless material. It did not disintegrate. It did not resist. It simply became inert, its absolute power negated by a greater absolute. Let me give it back, Naruto said, his blue and gold eyes meeting Madara's shocked Rinnegan. He placed his free palm flat against Madara's chest. There was no blast, no impact. Only a soft, golden light that enveloped the Uchiha. Madara's body convulsed. A scream of pure, unadulterated agony ripped from his throat as he felt his power being unraveled. It wasn't being blocked or suppressed. It was being meticulously deconstructed, thread by thread. The divine chakra of the 6 paths was the first to go, siphoned out of him and released into the atmosphere as harmless energy. The Rinnegan in his eye sockets dissolved, the Tomo and ripples fading until only his original Sharingan remained, which in turn flickered and died, leaving him with ordinary, terrified eyes. The grotesque face of Hashirama Senju that had been embedded in his chest writhed, then melted away as the stolen wood-style cells were rendered inert, turning to common dust. He fell to his knees, his white robes seeming to hang off a suddenly frail and mortal frame. The black receiver rods embedded in his body crumbled away. He was no longer the sage of 6 paths. He was just Madara Uchiha, an old man kept alive by stolen science and forbidden arts. The deep cracks of the reanimation jutsu began to spiderweb across his skin, but they too were halted as Naruto's influence severed his connection to the caster. He was left in his own living, dying, stolen body. Broken, mortal, defeated, Naruto withdrew his hand, his expression one of somber finality rather than triumph. You wanted to create a world of dreams because you couldn't bear the pain of reality, he said softly. But you can't build peace on a lie. And you can't call yourself a god when you don't even understand your own soul. He turned his back on the kneeling Uchiha, the battle, the war. Now completely and utterly finished. He looked out at the assembled shinobi, who were staring at him with a mixture of euphoric relief and stark terror. The silence broke. A ragged cheer started, then swelled into a roar. They had won. The war was over. Naruto had saved them. Sakura and Sasuke were the first to reach him, Kakashi a half-step behind. Naruto, you did it, Sakura cried, her relief so potent it made her dizzy. But as she got closer, she faltered. The sheer presence he radiated was overwhelming. It was like standing next to the sun. It was warm and life-giving, but also terrifying in its raw, immense power. This was her teammate, her friend, but he felt like a complete stranger. Sasuke said nothing. His Sharingan and Rinnegan were active, trying to analyze, to comprehend what he was seeing. He could see the energy pouring off Naruto, a self-sustaining fusion of life force and something else, something he couldn't name. It had no ceiling. It was infinite, his own hard-won power. The gift of Hagoromo himself felt like a puddle next to this endless ocean. For the first time since he was a child, Sasuke Uchiha felt utterly, hopelessly outclassed. He wasn't even a rival anymore. Naruto, Kakashi began, his voice strained. What happened? What is this power? He was trying to be the teacher, the leader, trying to fit this impossible event into a framework he could understand. Before Naruto could answer, a new voice cut through the air, smooth as silk and sharp as obsidian. He's become something you can't put in your bingo books, Kakashi Hatake. Every head turned. Standing a few yards away, having appeared from nowhere, was a woman they had never seen. She had dark skin, captivating golden eyes, and long purple hair tied in a practical ponytail. She wore a simple, form-fitting black uniform under a sleeveless white haori, and she projected an aura of lazy, confident danger. She looked utterly unfazed by the divine being standing nearby or the army of shinobi surrounding them. Her gaze was fixed on Naruto, a look of undisguised fascination and appraisal on her face. Who are you? Tsunade demanded, striding forward, flanked by the other Kage. How did you get here? The woman's golden eyes flickered to the 5th Hokage, a smirk playing on her lips. My name is Yoruichi Shihoin. As for how I got here, I followed the noise. She gestured vaguely at Naruto. And she said, her voice dropping into a more serious, conspiratorial tone, made a very, very loud noise. Shook up the whole neighborhood, you might say. Naruto turned his head, his gaze meeting Yoruichi's. For the first time since his transformation, a flicker of recognizable emotion crossed his face, curiosity. He saw no fear in her eyes. No awe, just interest. The look one predator might give another. You're not from here, he stated. It wasn't a question. He could feel it. Her energy, while potent and sharp, was structured differently from chakra. It was the energy of a soul. And you, Yoruichi shot back, her grin widening, are not entirely from here anymore, either. This exchange, this immediate and easy rapport between their savior and a complete stranger, sent a ripple of unease through the Konoha leadership. Naruto is a shinobi of the Hidden Leaf Village, Tsunade stated, her voice heavy with authority. His power is a treasured asset of our nation. Whatever happens next, it will be decided by us. Yoruichi let out a soft, genuine laugh. It wasn't mocking, but it was dismissive. You still don't get it, do you? Asset, your nation, Lady Hokage, you are standing in front of a hurricane, trying to claim ownership of the wind. You're talking about putting a leash on a celestial event. She took a step closer to Naruto, completely ignoring the wary stances of the cage. She addressed him directly, her voice now a low, intimate murmur meant only for him. Listen, kid, and I'm guessing you're still a kid in there somewhere, you've just rung the dinner bell for the entire cosmos. Beings you can't imagine have felt what you just did. My people are already on their way, and I guarantee they're not coming to ask for your autograph. They'll come to classify you, contain you. And if they can't do either, eliminate you. And your people. She flicked her eyes towards Tsunade and the others. They'll do the same, just with more paperwork and sentimental speeches. They'll call you a hero, build you a statue, and then lock you in a gilded cage to protect their asset. Everything she said resonated with a cold, hard truth inside Naruto's new consciousness. He looked at his friends. He saw Sakura's fear, Kakashi's confusion, Sasuke's frustrated envy. He looked at the cage and saw calculation. He saw them already planning how to leverage his power. How to rebuild their world with him as the cornerstone, and the ultimate deterrent. The chains would be comfortable this time, made of praise and love instead of scorn and isolation, but they would be chains all the same. The dream he had chased his whole life now felt like a child's fantasy. Yoruichi stopped in front of him, her head tilted. So, I'm going to give you a choice your friends won't. Option A. You stay here. You play the hero, become the pillar of their world, and spend the rest of your unnaturally long life as a beautiful, powerful weapon they polish every day and pray they never have to use. Option B. You come with me. I can show you what you've become. I can teach you about the worlds beyond this one, worlds you are now a part of. No leashes, no cages. Just answers. And a hell of a lot more fun than sitting around waiting for the next war. The choice was laid bare. A path of duty and confinement, or a path of freedom and the unknown. Naruto looked at Kakashi. Sensei, thank you for everything. He looked at Sakura. Don't worry about me. You and Sasuke, be happy. His gaze fell on Sasuke last. There was no rivalry left, no anger. Only a quiet understanding. Find your own way, Sasuke. Don't let anyone else choose it for you. He had said his goodbyes. He turned back to Yoruichi, a small, genuine smile touching his lips for the first time. It was a smile that held all his old warmth, but was tempered by a new, unshakable serenity. All right, Yoruichi Shihoin, he said, his voice resonating with a quiet power. Let's see what kind of fun you're talking about. Yoruichi's grin was dazzling. Excellent choice. Naruto, wait. Kakashi yelled, taking a step forward. You can't just leave. The village needs you. It needs a Hokage. Naruto replied, his back still to them. It doesn't need a god. Yoruichi placed a hand lightly on his arm. Hold on tight, she whispered. There was a faint shimmer in the air around them, the subtle displacement of space. And then, in a movement too fast for even Sasuke's Rinnegan to fully track, they were gone. Not in a puff of smoke or a flash of light, but a simple, absolute vanishing. One moment they were there, the next. The air was empty. The victorious roar of the allied shinobi forces died in their throats, replaced by a stunned, confused silence. Their savior, their hero, the boy who had promised to carry all their hatred and bring them peace, had just abandoned them. He had walked off the stage of their world with a mysterious woman, leaving them to pick up the pieces alone, grappling with a victory that suddenly felt terrifyingly hollow. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. Echoes and Hunters. The world dissolved into a smear of color and pressure. For a being who could now perceive the very weave of reality. The sensation of Yoruichi's shunpo was less a physical movement and more like the universe being folded in on itself. One moment, he was in the dust-choked crater of the final battlefield, the next. The air was blade-sharp and freezing, filled with the scent of pine and cold stone. Naruto stood steady as reality reasserted itself, his 9 golden tails barely stirring. They had materialized on the snow-dusted roof of a pagoda, one of many that dotted the stark, mountainous landscape. The wind whipped his golden howrie around him, but he felt no cold. Below, the monochrome architecture and disciplined stillness of the surroundings were unmistakable. The land of iron, he stated, his voice a low murmur against the wind. Neutral territory. Smart. Yoruichi landed beside him, a silent, cat-like grace in her every motion. She stretched, a fluid movement that spoke of coiled power. It's quiet. The samurai here are disciplined, but their energy is straightforward. Easy to read. More importantly, they're not aligned with any of your shinobi villages. It buys us a little time. She turned to face him, a critical, appraising look in her golden eyes. You handled that better than I expected. Most people are sick for a week after their first flash step. The world feels different now, Naruto admitted, looking at his own hands. He could see the faint golden aura of his own life force, and beyond it. He could feel the thrum of the world. He could sense the sparse life in the mountains, the hibernating bears in their caves, the hardy mountain goats, the disciplined heartbeats of the samurai in the city below. Everything is connected, like threads in a cloth. You're seeing the spirit hounds, the particles that make up everything in every realm, Yoruichi explained, walking a slow circle around him. She wasn't lecturing. She was observing, probing. And what you're feeling is the difference between chakra and what I use. What we use. She stopped in front of him and held up a finger. A small, dense sphere of crackling white energy formed at its tip. This is Kido. It's a manifestation of my Ryutsu, my spiritual pressure. It's the energy of my soul. Chakra, from what I gather, is a mix of spiritual and physical energy, kneaded and molded. She poked him in the chest with the energy-wreathed finger. It felt like a concentrated bolt of lightning, sharp and potent. But it grounded itself harmlessly against the vast ocean of his own power. Your energy now, she continued, her eyes gleaming with scientific curiosity, is neither. It's not just soul energy. And it's certainly not just chakra anymore. It's something purer, something that powers both. You're a primal source, Naruto. He processed this, the information slotting into his new consciousness with an intuitive ease. He could feel it now that she had named it. The churning sea of chakra in the shinobi he had left behind, and the sharp, distinct spiritual signatures of the woman before him. 2 different systems of power, both drawing from the same fundamental wellspring he now embodied. His enhanced senses suddenly sharpened, his head snapping up to look northwest, back towards the direction of the land of fire. They're coming. Yoruichi's playful demeanor vanished, replaced by a focused intensity. She closed her eyes for a second. I feel them too. 2 groups. Moving fast. Very fast. Her eyes opened, a dangerous glint in them. One group feels like your friends. Chakra signatures, a few powerful ones leading the pack. The other, a grim smile touched her lips. That's my people, the Onmitsukido, the stealth force, and if they're here, that means my dear student is leading them. Student, Sui Feng, captain of the 2nd Division and commander-in-chief of the Secret Mobile Corps, Yoruichi said. A hint of nostalgic exasperation in her voice. She's rigid, ridiculously devoted to the law, and believes any nail that sticks up should be hammered down with extreme prejudice. And you, my friend, are the biggest nail she's ever seen. Naruto's gaze didn't waver from the horizon. He could feel the approaching energies more clearly now. One group was a familiar, painful mix of emotions, duty, regret, loyalty. He could pinpoint Kakashi's signature, a blend of storm and sorrow that was impossible to mistake. The other group was a cold, sharp void of emotion, nothing but deadly intent and focused. Needle-like power. They'll meet here, Naruto stated. They're on a collision course. Good, Yoruichi said with a predatory grin. Let's give them something to talk about. Kakashi Hatake moved through the snow-laden trees like a ghost. Behind him, silent and invisible even to most shinobi, were 4 of the best Anbu the Leaf possessed. His mission, handed down by a frantic and furious Tsunade, was clear. Retrieve Naruto Uzumaki. Use of force was authorized, but capture was the priority. Sealing scrolls, suppression jutsu, everything short of killing him was on the table. Every step Kakashi took felt like a betrayal. He was hunting his own student, the boy he had come to see as a son. But duty was a heavy cloak, and the thought of Naruto's godlike power in the hands of that unknown woman was a strategic nightmare no cage could ignore. He burst into a large, flat clearing, a frozen lake whose surface was a perfect sheet of white snow. And he stopped dead. They were waiting for them. Naruto stood in the center of the lake, his golden haori a stark slash of color against the white landscape. Yoruichi was perched casually on a nearby ice-covered boulder, looking as relaxed as if she were waiting for a pot of tea to brew. "You shouldn't have come, sensei," Naruto said, his voice carrying clearly in the frigid air. It was filled with a profound sadness, but no anger. "You didn't give us a choice, Naruto," Kakashi replied, his single visible eye conveying a world of conflict. "The village is in chaos. They need you. I need you to come home." "To a cage," Yoruichi interjected from her perch, stretching her arms above her head. "He's already told you he's not interested." "This is a Konoha matter," Kakashi said, his hand already moving to lift his headband. "Stay out of it." Before he could unveil his Sharingan, a new presence announced itself. A dozen figures in black shihakusho and white masks materialized out of thin air, surrounding the entire lake. They moved with a synchronized, lethal grace that made even Kakashi's Anbu tense. Their leader, a small woman with a cold, severe face and an intricate hairstyle, landed silently between Kakashi's squad and Naruto. She wore a captain's haori, but it was sleeveless, revealing toned arms and the symbol of the Onmitsukido tattooed on her back. Her spiritual pressure was immense. A blade held to the throat of everyone present. Sui Feng ignored the Konoha shinobi completely, her piercing gaze fixed on Yoruichi, then on Naruto. "Yoruichi Shihoin," she stated, her voice clipped and cold. "As expected, you were found consorting with an enemy of the Seraite. You were to stand down and surrender for judgment." Her eyes then moved to Naruto. "In classified spiritual entity, by order of the Captain Commander, your existence has been deemed a threat to the balance of the worlds. You are to be expunged." Kakashi's blood ran cold. Expunged. These people weren't here to capture him. They were an execution squad. Yoruichi hopped down from her rock, an amused smirk on her face. "Hello, Sui Feng. Still as charming as ever. You can't just declare someone an enemy because you don't have a form for them to fill out. The law is absolute," Sui Feng snapped, her fury barely contained. She held up a hand, revealing a gauntlet that looked like a hornet's stinger. "My orders are absolute. All of you are obstacles." The situation imploded. Sui Feng's assassins moved first, a blur of motion aimed at Naruto. Simultaneously, Kakashi's Anbu, seeing the new threat, moved to intercept, while Kakashi himself charged Naruto, hoping to subdue him in the chaos. It was a maelstrom of conflicting objectives and deadly techniques. An Anbu's fire style was met with a Shinigami's Bakudo spell, a binding curse that erupted in a flash of light. Kakashi's Reikiri screeched, aimed not to kill but to disable, but his path was suddenly blocked by Sui Feng, who saw him as the closest threat. "Get out of my way, mortal," she hissed, her stinger-like Zanpakudo, Suzumaki, flashing. Their clash was brief and brutal. Kakashi's lightning-fast assassination technique against the honed lethality of the Gote 13's foremost killer. It was a dance of experts, but Kakashi was outmatched in sheer speed and raw power. And in the center of it all, Naruto and Yoruichi moved as one. "I'll take the little bee," Yoruichi purred. Vanishing from her spot, she reappeared behind Sui Feng, a hair's breadth from her former student's back. "You're still too slow," she whispered. Sui Feng spun around, her face a mask of rage and shock. Swinging her blade, Yoruichi sidestepped the lethal sting with an easy, fluid motion and chopped her lightly on the back of the neck. It wasn't a killing blow, but a Isai's strike of Hakuda that sent a jolt through Sui Feng's nervous system, causing her arm to go numb. "You dare look down on me!" Sui Feng screamed, her Ryutsu flaring. While Yoruichi danced with her protege, Naruto dealt with the rest. The four Anbu turned their attention to him, weaving hand signs in perfect sync. Fire style. Great Dragon Fire Jutsu. Wind style. Great Breakthrough. Earth style. Earth Dragon Bullet. A massive, wind-fueled torrent of fire and a barrage of mud projectiles slammed into Naruto's position. The combined attack kicked up a huge cloud of steam and debris. Kakashi, disengaging from the furious Sui Feng, felt a pang of dread. It was a perfectly executed combination, enough to level a fortress. When the steam cleared, Naruto hadn't moved. He stood in the same spot, one hand raised. A translucent golden barrier, thin as glass but utterly unbreakable, had formed in front of him, absorbing the cataclysmic force of the jutsu without a single tremor. He lowered his hand, and the barrier dissolved. "I don't want to hurt you," he said, his voice resonating with an honest, pained sincerity. The Anbu didn't hesitate. They drew their Tonto blades and charged, moving in a four-prong formation designed to leave no escape. Naruto sighed. He didn't move, but the 9 tails behind him did. One tail lashed out, moving faster than sight, and gently tapped the first Anbu on the chest. The shinobi froze, his eyes wide, before slumping to the ground, unconscious. A second tail curled through the air and disarmed another, the Tonto flying from his grasp. A third and fourth tail moved in a graceful, flowing arc, tapping the remaining 2 shinobi on their foreheads. They collapsed in silent, boneless heaps. It was over in less than 2 seconds. No violence, no cruelty, just an effortless, absolute neutralization. Sui Feng's assassins, seeing their target so easily handle the other intruders, hesitated for a fraction of a second. That was all Yoruichi needed. She moved through them like a phantom, a blur of black and white. A precise chop here, a disabling kick there. She didn't injure them seriously, but in moments, the entire elite squad of the Onmitsukido was on the ground, groaning and unable to move. The clearing fell silent. Only 3 people were left standing: Naruto, Yoruichi, and a stunned Kakashi. Sui Feng was on one knee, glaring with pure hatred, her body refusing to obey her commands to stand. "You see, Kakashi," Yoruichi said, dusting off her hands. "This is what happens when you try to put a leash on a god." "And you," she said, looking at Sui Feng. "This is what happens when you follow orders without thinking. You both lose." Naruto walked slowly across the frozen lake, his feet making no sound on the snow, until he stood before his former teacher. Kakashi tensed, his body screaming at him to fight, to run, to do something. But he was frozen by the sheer, overwhelming presence of the boy he had raised. Naruto reached out, not with malice, but with a gentle hand, and placed it on Kakashi's shoulder. "Go home, sensei," he said softly. "Tell them to stop. The Naruto they knew is gone. I'm not their weapon. I'm not their hero anymore. I'm just me, and I have to find out what that means." He squeezed his shoulder once, a gesture of final farewell, then turned and walked back to Yoruichi's side. "Let's go," he said to her. "This place is getting crowded." Yoruichi nodded, giving her fuming student one last, pitying glance. "Try not to pull a muscle on your way back, Sui Feng." With a final shimmer of displaced air, they vanished, leaving 2 defeated, humiliated squads in the snow, a dumbfounded Kakashi Hatake, and a world that was quickly learning it had no power over its own savior. They reappeared high in the mountains, in a secluded, geothermally active valley hidden by jagged peaks. Steam rose from natural hot springs, mingling with the falling snow to create a perpetual, dream-like mist. It was a place of impossible beauty and profound peace. Naruto walked to the edge of the largest pool, the water a perfect, inviting turquoise. The events of the day finally seemed to settle upon him. He had faced his former comrades, his teacher, and had been forced to show them just how far beyond them he now was. There was no joy in it. It hurt, seeing him, Naruto said quietly, his voice losing its nay resonance and becoming something more human, more vulnerable. He looked at me like I was a monster to be tamed. Yoruichi came to stand beside him, the usual smirk absent from her face. She watched him, seeing past the golden aura and the 9 tails to the young man within. "He's a soldier, and you've become something that doesn't fit on his map. People fear what they can't understand or control. I spent my whole life being feared," Naruto murmured, looking at his reflection in the steaming water. He saw the slitted pupils, the glowing marks on his cheeks. I thought if I got strong enough, if I saved everyone, they'd finally see me. But now, they just see the power. It's the same loneliness, just from a higher pedestal. A comfortable silence fell between them. Yoruichi, the woman who had fled her own pedestal, understood completely. I was born a princess, she said, her voice soft. Head of a noble clan. Destined to lead the stealth force. Every move I made was watched. Every decision weighed against 1,000 years of tradition. I was praised, respected, admired, and I was suffocating. She kicked a small stone into the water, watching the ripples. Freedom isn't about people loving you, kid. It's about not needing them to. It's about finding the one or two people who see all of it. The power, the monster, the man, and aren't afraid. The ones who don't want to use you, but just want to stand beside you. Naruto looked at her, truly looked at her. She wasn't afraid. She was intrigued, amused, and in this quiet moment, surprisingly empathetic. She hadn't tried to use him or control him. She had offered him a choice, a path. A genuine smile touched his lips, reaching his transformed eyes and making them glow a little brighter. And you, Yoruichi Shihoin, are you afraid? She met his gaze, and her signature grin returned, softer this time, but just as confident. Naruto Uzumaki, she said, her golden eyes seeming to laugh. I haven't been afraid a day in my life. Now, are you going to stand there moping all night, or are you going to get in the water? It's been a long day. He chuckled, a real, honest sound. The tension in his shoulders eased. For the first time, in this strange, new existence, he didn't feel like a god or a monster. He just felt like Naruto, talking to a friend. And for now, that was more than enough. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. The Arbiter's Gaze. The steam from the hot springs rose in thick, ethereal plumes, veiling the secluded valley in a comforting shroud of warmth and silence. For the first time since his world had shattered and reformed, Naruto felt a semblance of peace. Submerged to his shoulders in the impossibly blue water, the heat seeped into him, a pleasant, mortal sensation that stood in stark contrast to the divine energy thrumming in his core. His 9 tails, too vast to fit in the pool, lay resting on the stone banks, their golden light pulsing in a slow, steady rhythm, like a sleeping heart. Across from him, Yoruichi was a study in relaxed confidence, leaning back against the rock edge with her eyes closed, the moonlight tracing the powerful lines of her shoulders. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was a space for healing. A shared respite from the chaos they had outrun. You never told me why you left, Naruto said, his voice a low rumble that barely disturbed the quiet. You called yourself a princess. You were the head of a great clan, a captain, why throw it all away? Yoruichi's eyes opened, her golden gaze sharp and clear in the misty air. She was quiet for a moment, considering the question. Tradition is a beautiful thing, until it becomes a cage, she said finally. In Soul Society, everything is governed by laws laid down centuries ago. Laws of conduct, laws of power, laws of what is and is not acceptable. I was the perfect product of that system. Strong, noble, respected. She let out a soft, humorless laugh. And I was bored to the point of madness. Every day was the same. Every challenge was predictable. I wasn't living. I was performing a role. So I left. I chose freedom over a gilded cage. Her words resonated with the core of his own recent decision. He had been so focused on achieving a single role, Hokage, that he never stopped to ask if the cage, however gilded, was what he truly wanted. They called me a traitor, Yoruichi continued, her voice devoid of bitterness. My student, Sui Feng, felt personally betrayed. She worshipped me, and in her eyes, I abandoned everything she believed in. Maybe I did, but I would rather be hated for who I am than loved for who I am not. She looked at him, a genuine softness in her eyes. You understand that, don't you? He nodded slowly. He understood it better than anyone. He was about to reply when the world went silent. It wasn't a natural quiet. It was the absolute, profound absence of sound. The hiss of the steam, the whisper of the wind, the beating of his own heart, all of it vanished. The color bled from the valley. The vibrant blues and greens and whites fading to a uniform, lifeless gray. Yoruichi, frozen mid-motion across the pool, became a monochrome statue. Naruto was no longer in the valley. He was in an echo of it. A hollow shell. And he was not alone. A voice entered his mind. It was not a sound, but a direct impartation of thought, cold and clear as crystal, devoid of any emotion. Less than anomaly. Singularity. The balance is broken. Greater than asterisk. Naruto was on his feet in an instant, the water not even splashing around him. He was in a vision, a psychic space, but it felt utterly real. He looked around, his divine senses screaming a warning. The vision shifted. He was standing in Konoha. It was peaceful. The village was rebuilt, more beautiful than ever. Sunlight streamed down the streets, children were laughing. And his friends were there. Sakura, Kakashi, Shikamaru, Hinata, all of them were smiling. But their smiles were identical. Their eyes, when they looked at him, held no spark of individuality, only a placid, beatific adoration. He saw himself standing atop the Hokage monument, bathed in his golden light. The light spread from him, covering the entire village, the entire world. And as it touched people, their features softened, their struggles ceased, and their souls seemed to dissolve into a single, harmonious whole. There was no pain, no conflict, no ambition, no love, no hate, just peace. A perfect, stagnant, soulless peace. The cold voice returned, layering images over the scene. He saw the barrier between the elemental nations and soul society cracking, then shattering. He saw the spirits of the dead wandering aimlessly through the world of the living, the cycle of reincarnation broken. He saw reality itself fraying at the edges, different dimensions bleeding into one another in a chaotic, meaningless soup. Less than your existence is a wound upon reality. Greater than asterisk, the voice explained, its logic as sharp and merciless as a surgeon's scalpel. Less than you have fused the mortal and the spiritual. Two planes that must remain separate. Your very presence erodes the laws of life and death. Your desire to protect, to save, is the catalyst for this grand homogenization. In your quest for peace, you will bring about the end of all things by making them one. Greater than asterisk, he was shown a final, terrifying image. A vast, endless ocean of golden light, silent and eternal. And within it, A.S. Ingle consciousness, his own, presiding over a universe where nothing ever happened, nothing ever changed, forever. It was the infinite Tsukuyomi, not as a dream, but as a divine, unending reality. Less than I am the arbiter of that which must be. The guardian of separation. You are an aberration, a sin against the fundamental order. You must be unmade. Greater than asterisk. The vision shattered like glass. Naruto gasped, reality slamming back into him with the force of a physical blow. He was back in the hot spring, on his knees, the water churning around him. His breath came in ragged, panicked bursts. The vibrant colors of the valley seemed too sharp. The sounds too loud. Yoruichi was in front of him, her hands on his shoulders, her face a mask of alarm. Naruto. What is it? What happened? He couldn't speak. The logic of the vision was a poison seeping into his soul. A sin against order. Your desire to protect will destroy everything. Before he could form a reply, the ground began to vibrate. A low, humming sound filled the air, a discordant note that set his teeth on edge. From the shadows between the rocks at the edge of the valley, things began to emerge. They looked like hounds, but they were made of material that was not rock or flesh or metal. It was a shifting, crystalline substance that seemed to absorb the light around it, creating pockets of absolute blackness. They had no eyes, no mouths, just sleek, predatory forms that moved with an unnatural smoothness. There were 3 of them, and as they stepped onto the snowy ground, the very earth they touched seemed to fizzle out of existence. The snow didn't melt, it vanished. The rock didn't crumble, it was erased, leaving behind a patch of shimmering, static-like void. Yoruichi was instantly on her feet, placing herself between Naruto and the creatures. Her spiritual pressure flared, a sharp, potent wave of power. Get a hold of yourself, Naruto. What are these things? He finally found his voice, the words torn from a place of deep, primal fear. They're from him, from the arbiter. They unmake things. One of the hounds lunged. It was impossibly fast, a black streak against the white snow. Yoruichi met it head-on, her movements a blur of practiced grace. She aimed a powerful, Ryutsu-infused kick at its head, a blow that could shatter a mountain. Her foot connected. There was no sound of impact. No recoil. The hound didn't stagger or break. It simply endured. Yoruichi's eyes widened in shock as she pushed off, landing lightly a dozen feet away. It's like kicking a hole in the universe, she breathed, her confidence shaken for the first time. Another hound opened a maw that wasn't there a second before, and a beam of pure, shimmering void shot towards her. Yoruichi used Shunpo to evade, the beam striking the cliff face behind her. A perfect, semicircular chunk of the mountain vanished, leaving no rubble, no dust, only a smooth, gray nothingness where rock used to be. Naruto scrambled out of the pool, his mind still reeling from the vision. But his instincts screaming at him to act. He saw Yoruichi, the strongest person he had ever met besides himself, being forced onto the defensive. He raised a hand, and a dense, golden orb of energy formed, a miniature Rasengan, but composed of his new, divine power. He flung it at the nearest hound. The orb struck the creature square in the flank. This time, there was a reaction. The golden energy warred against the hound's anti-existence nature. The crystalline hide cracked, and with a sound like shattering glass, the creature exploded into 1,000 BL. Axe shards before dissolving into nothing. It worked. But as Naruto watched, the two remaining hounds seemed to shimmer, and the air around them coalesced. A third hound reformed, identical to the one he had just destroyed. They were regenerating, or rather, they were being replaced. Brute force isn't working, Yoruichi yelled, dodging another erasing beam. They're not living things. They're just instructions. Programs. The word clicked with the Arbiter's cold, logical voice. These weren't soldiers. They were tools. They were scalpels sent to excise a tumor. The vision replayed in his head. The Arbiter's accusation. Your power isn't just force. It's the power to create. To impose your will on reality. An idea, terrifying and brilliant, sparked in his mind. The Arbiter's creatures were forces of unmaking. He couldn't fight nothing with something. He had to rewrite the equation. He closed his eyes, ignoring the hounds that were now turning their full attention to him. He shut out Yoruichi's warning shout. He reached deep inside himself, past the roiling ocean of power, to the very core of his being, the nexus where Naruto, Uzumaki and Kurama had become one. He wasn't looking for energy to blast. He was looking for the creative spark. The will to be. He opened his eyes. They glowed with an intensity that dwarfed their previous light. He lifted his hands, palms up. You are wrong, he whispered to the absent Arbiter. My will is not a curse. He didn't fire a beam or form an orb. Instead, he exerted his will on the valley itself. The patches of void where the hounds had erased reality began to fill in. The rock, the snow, the very air reasserted itself, knitting back together at his command. The hounds lunged at him. Naruto didn't move to dodge. His 9 tails shot out, not to strike, but to surround the creatures. They didn't touch them. Instead, they began to emit a soft, golden resonance. It wasn't an attack, it was a broadcast. He was projecting a single, simple concept into the very fabric of their being: create. The hounds convulsed. Their anti-existence nature warred with the absolute, creative command being forced upon them. Their crystalline bodies flickered violently. Their black forms shot through with veins of brilliant gold. They were being given an instruction that was fundamentally incompatible with their purpose. With a final, silent scream that echoed in the spiritual plane, they destabilized. They didn't explode. They unraveled, their forms dissolving not into nothingness, but into pure, neutral energy, which was then harmlessly absorbed into the environment. The valley was whole again. The threat was gone. Naruto fell to one knee, breathing heavily. He wasn't tired from a lack of energy, his reserves were functionally infinite. But the mental and spiritual effort of imposing his creative will against a targeted force of unmaking had been immense. It was the hardest thing he had ever done. Yoruichi was at his side in an instant, her hand on his back. Her face was a mixture of awe at what she had just witnessed and deep concern. Naruto, what was that? What did you see? He looked up at her, the terror from the vision still raw in his eyes. It showed me a future where I win, he said, his voice trembling slightly. A future where I protect everyone, and in doing so, I erase them. It told me my existence is a mistake. He finally let the fear show, the vulnerability of the boy beneath the god. Yoruichi, what if it's right? What if I'm just a walking apocalypse? She didn't answer right away. She knelt in the snow in front of him. Taking his face in her hands, her touch firm and grounding. She forced him to meet her intense, unwavering golden gaze. "Don't you dare," she said, her voice low and fierce. "Don't you let that cold, dead thing get in your head. Futures are not written in stone. Power is a tool, nothing more. A knife can be used to carve a toy or to kill a man. The knife is not evil. The choice belongs to the one who holds it." She leaned closer, her forehead almost touching his. "I've seen what your power can do, but I've also seen you. I saw the kid who hesitated to hurt his former comrades. I saw the man who felt the pain of his friend's fear. And I just saw someone who chose creation over destruction to win a fight. That arbiter sees a cosmic anomaly. I see Naruto Uzumaki. Her faith in him was a physical force, a shield against the creeping, cosmic dread. It was the anchor he desperately needed in this terrifying new ocean. You are not a force of nature," she said, her voice softening. "You are a man who was given the power of one. You still get to choose what you do with it. And I," she added, a small, defiant smile returning to her lips, "choose to stand here with you. So whatever this arbiter is, it won't just be facing you. It'll be facing us." He stared into her eyes, seeing not a trace of fear, only absolute conviction. In that moment, the bond between them was forged into something unbreakable. She wasn't his follower, his master, or his subject. She was his partner, his equal. The fear in his soul didn't vanish, but it receded. The arbiter's logic was powerful, but Yoruichi's faith was stronger. He took a deep breath, the cold mountain air filling his lungs, and gave her a slow, grateful nod. They had an enemy that could unmake reality. But they also had each other. And for the first time, that felt like it might be enough. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. A City of Exiles. The unspoken truth hung in the misty air of the valley. They were fugitives. Not just from the shinobi villages or soul society, but from a fundamental law of the universe. Staying in one place, no matter how remote, was no longer an option. Every moment they remained, they were a beacon, inviting the attention of hunters both mortal and cosmic. "That thing, the arbiter," Naruto said, his voice steady as he pulled on the simple black shirt and pants Yoruichi had procured from a traveler's pack she kept sealed away. "It found us through my power. It used my own mind against me. We need more than just a place to hide. We need a place where my energy is just a drop in a noisy ocean. And we need answers." Yoruichi, already dressed and leaning against a snow-dusted pine, nodded. The playful glint in her eyes was tempered by a sharp, strategic focus. "I know a place. It's not on any map of your world. Or mine. Most people don't even believe it's real. They call it the Sokai, the boundary city. It's less a city and more of a cosmic shipwreck." She pushed off from the tree, her movements fluid and purposeful. "It exists in a stable dimensional rift, a crossroads for worlds. It's where the lost and the exiled wash up. Rogue shinobi, disgraced shinigami, creatures from realms you've never dreamed of. Its very foundations are a chaotic mix of spiritual energies. To anyone looking for you from the outside, trying to pinpoint your signature, there would be like trying to find a specific grain of sand in a hurricane. Hope, sharp and clear, cut through Naruto's apprehension. Can we find information there? About the arbiter? If there are answers to be found outside of the Seraite's forbidden archives, they'll be in the Sokai, she confirmed. But be warned, it's a city of survivors. Trust is the rarest currency, and everyone there is running from something. They won't welcome a being of your power with open arms. They'll see you as a threat to their hard-won anonymity. I'm getting used to that, Naruto replied with a wry, humorless smile. Good, Yoruichi said, her own grin returning. Then let's go stir up some trouble. She placed a hand on his shoulder. The world didn't fold this time. Instead, she guided his perception, focusing his senses on the concept of a crossroads. A place that was everywhere and nowhere at once. He felt a metaphysical lurch, and the snowy valley was gone, replaced by a dizzying, breathtaking view. They stood on a floating platform of dark, moss-covered stone. Below them was not ground, but a swirling, violet-tinged abyss. All around them, connected by a haphazard network of glowing energy bridges and rickety-looking rope walkways, were other floating islands. On these islands was a city unlike any he could have imagined. Shinobi-style pagodas with glowing paper lanterns stood next to jagged towers of crystalline material that hummed with an inner light. Stone-carved hollows reminiscent of Hueco Mundo's architecture were built into the sides of floating chunks of earth, their entrances dark and foreboding. The air itself was alive, thick with the clashing energies of chakra, ryutsu, nature energy, and a dozen other power sources he couldn't name. It was chaotic, vibrant, and dangerous. "Welcome to the Sokai," Yoruichi announced, breathing in the strange air as if it were a fine perfume. Their arrival, however quiet, did not go unnoticed. Figures began to emerge from the shadows of nearby structures. A man with the pale skin and masked face of a former Arankar, his spiritual pressure heavy and hollow. A woman whose body was entwined with living vines, her chakra feeling as old as the earth itself. They didn't attack, they simply watched, their gazes wary and calculating. A new presence made its way towards them, walking across a bridge of solidified light. He was an older man with a calm, weathered face and long gray hair tied back in a simple knot. He wore the traditional shihakusho of a shinigami, but his black robes were worn and frayed, and he wore no captain's haori. His spiritual pressure was immense, deep and controlled like a vast, still lake. It was the power of a former Gote 13 captain, but it was tinged with a profound weariness. He carried a simple wooden staff, and his eyes held the weight of centuries. "Yoruichi Shihoin," the man said, his voice a calm baritone. "It has been a long time. I knew that surge of untamed power I felt shaking the realm's the scent of your particular brand of trouble." "Coin," Yoruichi greeted him with a nod of respect. "Still holding this pile of rocks together, I see. You look tired." "The city is always restless," Coin Hakamori replied, his gaze shifting to Naruto. The old Shinigami's eyes widened almost imperceptibly as he took in the 9 golden tails and the sheer, unfiltered divine energy pouring off of him. The air around Naruto was visibly shimmering. "And you have brought a typhoon to my harbor. He needs sanctuary and information," Yoruichi said, getting straight to the point. "We're being hunted." "By whom?" Coin asked, his eyes never leaving Naruto. "Everyone," Naruto answered simply. "And something else. A thing that calls itself the Arbiter." The name, or perhaps the way he said it, caused a ripple of unease to pass through the assembled exiles. Coin's calm facade finally cracked, his expression hardening into one of grave concern. "The Arbiter is not a hunter," Coin said, his voice low and serious. "It is a force of cosmic correction. If it has its gaze on you, boy, then you are a danger not just to yourself, but to this city and everyone in it. Your very presence here puts our existence at risk." From another bridge, a new voice, sharp and feminine, spoke up. "Or, perhaps he is the very thing the Sokai was made for, Master Hakamori." A woman with sharp features and hair the color of autumn leaves approached, flanked by 2 shinobi whose faces were obscured by porcelain fox masks. She radiated a potent, wild sage chakra, a place for those who do not fit within the narrow laws of their home worlds. "Chio," Coin acknowledged with a slight bow of his head, "your Whispering Fang clan has always been too welcoming of stray dogs. This one is more of a dragon. And dragons can be powerful guardians." Chio countered, her intelligent eyes studying Naruto with undisguised curiosity. "Enough," Coin said, striking the stone platform with the butt of his staff. The sound echoed with a note of finality. "I am the guardian of this city. I cannot turn you away, Yoruichi, but I cannot allow a celestial event to take up residence without knowing its nature. I must have PR. Oof that he is not the cataclysm the Arbiter believes him to be." He pointed with his staff towards the center of the city, where a massive, slowly rotating crystalline spire pulsed with a sickly, unstable purple light. Cracks of dark energy occasionally spider-webbed across its surface. "That is the city's core stabilizer. It is an artifact of unknown origin that anchors our rift in space-time. Lately, it has begun to fail. The chaotic energies it is meant to regulate are leaking, creating dead zones that erase matter and memory. My own power can only contain it, not heal it. Brute force will only shatter it completely. And our city along with it." He looked directly at Naruto, his eyes issuing a clear challenge. "You possess power on a scale I have not seen since the Soul King himself. But is it the power of a mindless storm? Or a master craftsman?" The Arbiter accuses you of being a force of homogenization, of erasure. Prove it wrong. Heal the core. Show me you are a creator, not a destroyer. Do this, and the Sokai and all its knowledge are open to you. Fail, and you must leave before you unmake us all. Yoruichi started to protest, but Naruto held up a hand, stopping her. He looked at the unstable core, feeling the wild, discordant energies clashing within it. It was like the hounds, but magnified 1,000 times, a symphony of chaos. This was not a test of power. It was a test of control. A test of the very thing he feared he lacked. I'll do it, Naruto said, his voice firm. He walked past Coin, his golden tails trailing behind him, and stepped onto the energy bridge leading to the core. The air grew heavier with every step, the chaotic pressure pushing against him. Yoruichi moved to a parallel platform, her body tense, ready to intervene if the core fully destabilized. Naruto stood before the massive, pulsing crystal. He could feel the raw, conflicting energies, the rage of a hollow, the discipline of a Shinigami, the wildness of nature, all trapped together, tearing each other apart. His first instinct, the shinobi instinct, was to overwhelm it. To pour his own pure, divine energy into it and force it into submission. But the Arbiter's vision flashed in his mind. The placid, empty smiles. The golden, stagnant ocean. That was the path of overwhelming force. The path of erasure. He closed his eyes and took a different approach. He didn't push against the chaos. He reached out to it, extending his senses, his consciousness, into the heart of the storm. He didn't try to silence the discordant notes, he listened to them. He felt the hollow's desperate hunger, the Shinigami's lingering regret, the sage's connection to a life that no longer existed. It was a chorus of pain. Instead of flooding it with power, he offered it harmony. He began to channel his own energy, but not as a weapon. He broke it down, weaving it into the chaotic storm. He introduced a new frequency, a gentle, resonant hum that didn't seek to dominate, but to guide. He showed the rage a path to peace, the regret a path to acceptance, the wildness a path to balance. He wasn't rewriting the energies, he was teaching them a new song. The sickly purple light of the core began to soften. The violent pulses slowed, becoming a steady, rhythmic beat. Veins of gold spread through the crystal, not conquering the purple but merging with it, creating a beautiful, stable tapestry of shimmering lavender and gold light. The dark cracks healed, and the oppressive, chaotic pressure over the city lifted, replaced by a calm, revitalizing aura. Naruto opened his eyes. The core was whole, its light now a steady, gentle beacon that seemed to fill the entire city with a newfound sense of peace. He hadn't destroyed the chaos. He had transformed it into a new, more complex form of order. A stunned silence fell over the assembled exiles. Koin Hakamori stared, his centuries of weary cynicism momentarily forgotten, replaced by sheer, unadulterated awe. He had presented an impossible task, and this boy had solved it not with the power of a god, but with the wisdom of one. Naruto turned, the mental and spiritual focus having taken a toll, and saw Yoruichi smiling at him. It wasn't her usual teasing smirk. It was a smile of genuine, fierce pride. That evening, the Sokai, a city that rarely celebrated, was alive with light and sound. Lanterns of every color bobbed in the air, and strange, alien music drifted from the taverns. Naruto and Yoruichi sat at a secluded table on a high balcony, a flask of some potent, glowing Shinigami sake between them. You did it, kid, Yoruichi said, bumping his shoulder with her own. You didn't just impress them. You gave them hope. I haven't seen the city this alive in a century. I just listened, Naruto said, looking out at the vibrant city below. A weight had been lifted from his soul. The Arbiter had shown him a future of destruction born from his good intentions. But today, he had proven that vision wrong. He could protect, he could save, and he could do it by creating, not by erasing. He had a choice. That's the part they can't understand, Yoruichi said, her voice soft. The old men in their council rooms and their throne rooms. They think power is a hammer. And every problem is a nail. You just showed them it can be a musician's hand. She poured him another cup of sake, their fingers brushing. The touch was light, but it sent a jolt of warmth through him that had nothing to do with the alcohol. Thank you, Yoruichi, he said, his voice quiet and sincere. For believing in me. Back in the valley, I was close to believing that thing. I told you, she said, her golden eyes locking with his over the rim of her cup. I see you, and I like what I see. Her gaze was direct, leaving no room for misinterpretation. The playful banter had melted away, leaving an attraction that was palpable and real. Later, Koin Hakamori kept his word. He led them to the city's heart, a library carved into a massive, petrified tree. Inside were scrolls and books and floating data crystals from 1,000 different fallen worlds. The Arbiter is not a being, Koin explained, his voice filled with a newfound respect. It is a system, the immune system of reality. It has no malice. It only perceives threats to the cosmic order and eliminates them. It has manifested before, in ancient times when the worlds grew too close. It cannot be fought, for it is a part of the laws of existence. It cannot be killed. It can only be satisfied, convinced that the infection has been brought into balance with the rest of the body. Naruto and Yoruichi exchanged a look. It was a terrifying, almost impossible revelation. Their enemy was not a monster to be slain, but a concept to be reasoned with. As they left the library, they paused on the balcony again. Looking out at the Sokai, their temporary home. The revitalized core pulsed gently, a symbol of their first true victory. So, how do you reason with the immune system of the universe? Naruto asked, the sheer scale of their task settling on him. Yoruichi moved to stand beside him, her shoulder pressing against his. The same way you fixed the core, she said, her voice a confident murmur in the strange. Alien Knight, you don't fight it, you show it a better way. You teach it a new song. He looked at her, at the absolute faith in her eyes, and for the first time, he believed they could. They were no longer running. They had a sanctuary, allies, and a path. Together. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. The Unlikely Truce. The peace of the Sokai, vibrant and hard-won, lasted for 3 weeks. It was a time of learning, of quiet moments on high balconies, and of a deepening bond between the Fox God and the Flash Goddess. Naruto, under the guidance of Koin and the city's vast library, began to explore the true nature of his power, learning to feel the subtle currents of the multiverse that converged in the city. Yoruichi acted as his sparring partner, his confidant, and his anchor to the man he had been. Their easy chemistry blossoming into a profound, unspoken intimacy. But their sanctuary was an island in a cosmic sea, and a storm was brewing on the horizon. It began not with an attack, but with a tremor in the very soul of the city. Koin Hakamori found them in the library, his usually placid face etched with deep lines of worry. The Arbiter has changed its methods, he said, his voice grave. It no longer sends its hounds. It is squeezing. The dimensional channels that connect the Sokai to other realms are becoming unstable. Travel is getting dangerous. Chio of the Whispering Fang clan appeared moments later, her expression equally grim. It is not just here. Our seers are getting reports from our contacts in the elemental nations. Unseasonal blizzards in the land of wind. Earthquakes in the land of fire where no fault lines exist. The spirit world is in turmoil. The summons are becoming agitated, refusing to answer their contracts. Naruto felt a cold dread snake its way up his spine. The Arbiter wasn't attacking him directly anymore. It was attacking everything he was connected to. It was laying siege to his former home, trying to sever the limb to save the body. It knows I won't stand by while innocent people suffer, Naruto said, the realization hitting him with the force of a physical blow. This is a trap. It's trying to draw me out. It's a checkmate. Yoruichi corrected, her arms crossed, her golden eyes narrowed in strategic calculation. We stay here, and our worlds slowly crumble. We leave, and we walk right into its line of fire. It has us cornered. The moral dilemma was no dilemma at all. Naruto had spent his entire life fighting to protect his home. He couldn't hide in a pocket dimension while it fell apart, no matter the cost to himself. His face hardened, the serene calm of the nascent god replaced by the iron resolve of the shinobi he had always been. Then we go out, Naruto. That's what it wants, Koin warned. Away from the chaotic energy of the Sokai, your signature will be a bonfire in a dark forest. It will focus its full power on you. Let it, Naruto said, his voice resonating with a quiet, unshakable finality. He looked at Yoruichi. He didn't have to ask. He saw the answer in her eyes. I was getting tired of all this reading anyway, she said with a sharp, fearless grin. Where to first? We can't just charge in blind. Naruto countered, his mind already racing, piecing together a strategy. Fighting the Arbiter directly is a losing battle. Coin said it needs to be satisfied, to be shown that a new balance is possible. We can't do that alone. We need everyone. Yoruichi raised an eyebrow. You mean the same people who tried to capture and execute you a few weeks ago? They're not exactly going to line up to help. They will if the alternative is watching their worlds disintegrate, Naruto stated. But you're right. We can't just show up and ask nicely. We need someone who can speak both languages. Someone who understands the politics of shinobi and the laws of soul society. Someone they'll all listen to, whether they like it or not. A slow, knowing smile spread across Yoruichi's face. Oh, I know just the man. I hope you like hats. The transition to the world of the living was jarring after the chaotic harmony of the Sokai. Karakura town felt mundane, its spiritual fabric thin and quiet. Yoruichi led him, not to the bustling town center, but to a small, unassuming, and slightly run-down candy shop on a quiet corner. The sign above the door read, Urahara Shop. Kazuki. Yoruichi called out, sliding the door open without bothering to knock. Stop hiding in your basement and come say hello to an old friend. A moment later, a man in a green striped bucket hat, a green yukata, and traditional wooden geta sandals emerged from the back, waving a small fan in front of his face. He had a perpetually lazy smile, but his eyes, shadowed by his hat, were incredibly sharp and intelligent. Ah, Yoruichi, to what do I owe the pleasure? And who is this impressive young man you've brought with you? Kazuki Urahara's gaze swept over Naruto, and for a fraction of a second, his lazy smile tightened. His senses, far more acute than any normal Shinigami's, were taking in the sheer, unimaginable scale of Naruto's spiritual power. You've been very, very busy, haven't you? No time for games. Kazuki, Yoruichi said, her tone all business. The worlds are coming apart at the seams. We have a cosmic problem, and you're the only person I know who's crazy enough to help us solve it. They sat in the small, cluttered back room of the shop, and over cups of tea, they explained everything. The Arbiter, the Vision, the escalating disasters. Urahara listened patiently, his fan occasionally flicking shut and open, the only sign of his deep concentration. When they finished, he was silent for a long moment. The Spirit King's purpose was to regulate the flow of souls, maintaining the balance. He mused, tapping his fan against his chin. With his power compromised, it's no surprise that a more ancient, automated system would reactivate to prevent a total collapse. This Arbiter is a planetary-scale antibody. And you, Naruto-san, are the foreign body it's trying to eliminate. He looked at Naruto, his gaze piercing. You are correct. You cannot fight it. You cannot reason with it in any conventional sense. You must demonstrate that you are not a disease, but a symbiotic evolution. And to do that, you need a stage. His lazy smile returned, wider and more mischievous than before. A summit of the two worlds. How wonderfully dramatic. It'll be a logistical nightmare. They'll never agree. They will if you're the one who calls it, Naruto stated. They'll be too afraid to say no to you. Urahara let out a hearty laugh. You flatter me, but you're not wrong. Very well. Getting the cage and the captains in one room without them trying to kill each other will be my little challenge. Your challenge, he said, his eyes locking on Naruto's, will be to convince them to trust a god. The meeting place was a testament to Urahara's genius, a perfect replica of the Tenporin. The neutral council hall in the Soul King's palace, hidden away in a pocket dimension of his own creation. The air was still and sterile. Around a large, circular BLE sat the most powerful people of two worlds, and the tension was thick enough to choke on. On one side sat the five cage. Tsunade's arms were crossed, her scowl fixed in place. Gaara was impassive, but his sand swirled restlessly in the gourd on his back. The Raikage, Tsuchikage, and Mizukage were equally tense and hostile. On the other side sat the representatives of the Gote 13. Shunsui Kyoraku, the new captain commander, had his straw hat pulled low over his eyes, but his relaxed posture did nothing to hide the immense pressure he radiated. Next to him, Byakuya Kuchiki was a statue of noble frost. And Sui Feng looked as if she would rather be anywhere else, her glare alternating between the cage and the empty seat beside her, clearly meant for Yoruichi. This is a farce, the rakeage, boomed. We should be discussing how to capture the Jinchuriki, not sitting down with these reapers. I assure you, the feeling is mutual, Sui Feng shot back. We should be eliminating the anomaly, not negotiating with mortals who can barely control their own chakra. Enough. Shunsui's voice was soft, but it cut through the hostility like a razor. Urahara wouldn't have gone to this much trouble for a social gathering. We are all feeling the disturbances. The Dongai is becoming treacherous, our patrols in the Rukongai are reporting aggressive spiritual manifestations. This is a shared problem. The problem is Naruto Uzumaki. Tsunade slammed her fist on the table, which cracked under the force. He abandoned his duty, his village, and took with him the greatest power in our world. Just as the argument was about to escalate, a shimmer of displaced space appeared in the center of the room. Naruto and Yoruichi stepped through, their arrival immediate and silent. A wave of CK rippled through the assembled leaders. Naruto's presence was a physical weight. He wasn't flaring his power, but it radiated from him, calm, vast, and absolute. He wore the same simple black attire, his golden haori and 9 tails flowing gently in the non-existent breeze of the dimension. He did not look like a weapon. He did not look like a monster. He looked like a king. Yoruichi stood at his side, her confident smirk firmly in place as she gave Sui Feng a little wave, earning a barely suppressed snarl in return. Naruto's gaze swept across the faces at the table, acknowledging each of them. There was no anger, no pleading in his eyes, only a serene, unshakable authority. I did not abandon my duty, he said, his voice filling the hall, calm and clear. I have accepted a new one. He began to speak. He laid out the facts with a simple, irrefutable logic. He described the arbiter, its purpose as a cosmic regulator. He explained the escalating decay of their worlds, not as an attack, but as a symptom of a fundamental imbalance that his own existence had triggered. He made them understand that their infighting, their desire to control or destroy him, was the very chaos that proved the arbiter's point. It believes the fusion of our worlds is a cancer, Naruto explained, his gaze sweeping over all of them. It thinks the only solution is to surgically remove me, and cauterize the wound by letting your worlds wither. But it's wrong. The connection between our realms isn't a disease. It's the next stage of existence. Preposterous. The Tsuchikage scoffed. You expect us to believe this fairy tale and entrust our fate to a runaway shinobi. Naruto didn't argue. You don't have to trust me, he said. You only have to trust your own senses. He looked up at the ceiling of the pocket dimension. Urahara's creation was impressive, but the combined, conflicting spiritual pressures of 24 of the most powerful beings in existence were causing it to strain. Tiny, hair-line cracks of shimmering static were beginning to appear in the fabric of the space. Naruto lifted a single hand. He reached out, not physically, but with his will. He touched the very framework of the dimension. The leaders felt it, a gentle, probing presence that was impossibly vast. He didn't unleash a wave of power. He didn't force his will upon it. Instead, he began to reinforce it. The cracks of static healed instantly. The subtle trembling of the space ceased. A warm, golden light spread through the dimension's architecture, not replacing Urahara's design, but integrating with it, strengthening it from the inside out. The space didn't just stabilize, it expanded, feeling more solid, more real than the physical world they had left behind. It was a quiet, profound miracle of creation. The hall was utterly silent. The cage and captains were staring, their arguments and preconceived notions dissolving in the face of this impossible, gentle demonstration of power. He hadn't destroyed, he had fortified. Naruto lowered his hand. The arbiter can only see one solution. Amputation, he said, his voice now holding the weight of his action. I am offering another. Integration. I can stabilize the connection between our worlds. I can weave our realities together in a way that creates a new, stronger balance. A balance that will satisfy the arbiter and end the decay. He looked them all in the eye, one by one. I am not your weapon. I am not your enemy. I am the only thing standing between you and a slow, quiet end. You can either stand with me as allies against a cosmic law, or you can stand aside. The choice is yours. No one spoke. The sheer scale of the situation, the undeniable truth in his words, and the quiet authority with which he spoke had shattered their paradigm. It was Shunsui Kyoraku who broke the silence, a slow smile spreading across his face as he pushed his hat back. Well, he said, his voice laced with a weary amusement. It seems our definition of haired problem just got a whole lot bigger. And a whole lot more interesting. He looked at Naruto, a newfound respect in his eyes. The Gote 13 was founded to protect the balance of souls. It would seem our mandate has just been updated. You have our cooperation, Naruto Uzumaki. Gaara was the next to speak, his voice calm and steady. Naruto has always walked a path to protect those he cares for. The scale of that path has changed. But his heart has not. The sand stands with him. One by one, with varying degrees of reluctance and shock, the other leaders gave their assent. It was not an alliance of trust or friendship. It was a truce born of absolute necessity, a fragile coalition facing a threat none of them could comprehend, led by a boy none of them could control. Naruto stood with Yoruichi, no longer fugitives, but the twin pillars of a new, impossible age. The game had changed. They were no longer just trying to survive, they were about to wage a war of ideals against reality itself. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. War of Ideals. The truce was not an alliance. It was a ceasefire held together by cosmic terror. In the pocket dimension Urahara had stabilized with Naruto's help, the leaders of two worlds attempted to forge a unified front. The result was a study in controlled chaos. Shinobi, accustomed to deception and asymmetrical warfare, proposed strategies of infiltration and sabotage. The Shinigami captains, beings of immense personal power, planned for direct spiritual confrontation and Kido-based containment fields. It was like watching master blacksmiths and master watchmakers trying to build an engine together. Kakashi Hatake found himself in a prolonged, excruciatingly polite argument with Byakuya Kuchiki over troop deployment. Your shinobi rely on stealth and misdirection, Byakuya stated. His voice is crisp and cold as a winter morning. Such tactics are irrelevant against a being that operates on a conceptual level. We require a direct, overwhelming application of force. And your direct force is useless against an enemy that can't be physically struck, Kakashi countered, his single eye crinkled in a strained smile. It's a philosophical battle. We need to be smarter, not stronger. Quote, they were getting nowhere. The greatest minds of their worlds were trapped in their own doctrines, unable to grasp the nature of a war fought not for territory, but for the soul of reality itself. Naruto and Yoruichi stood apart from the bickering, observing from the edge of the council hall. He had tried to explain, to make them understand, but they were soldiers trying to comprehend a theological debate. They're afraid, Yoruichi murmured, her gaze fixed on the tense gathering. And when powerful people get afraid, they fall back on what they know, even if they know it won't work. It's comforting. There's no time for comfort, Naruto replied, his senses extending beyond the pocket dimension. He could feel it, the slow, grinding pressure of the Arbiter's influence. The blight was spreading. We need to act. He was about to step forward, to force the issue, when a profound and sudden silence fell over the dimension. It was the same hollow stillness he had felt in the valley. A soundless thunderclap that announced the presence of the Arbiter. But this time, it was not a vision. In the center of the hall, directly on the circular table T had been the stage for their failed diplomacy, a figure coalesced from the still air. It was not a monster of void and crystal. It was a young man who looked almost identical to Naruto himself. He had the same blonde hair, the same determined set to his jaw. He wore a simple, unadorned white haori over a black shihakusho, a blend of shinobi and shinigami aesthetics. But the differences were stark and chilling. The whisker marks on his cheeks were absent, his face a mask of serene, flawless perfection. His eyes were not the vibrant, emotional blue of Naruto's, they were the color of a winter sky, clear, cold, and utterly empty of emotion. 9 tails of pure, white, incorporeal light swayed gently behind him, their movements precise and controlled, without a hint of Naruto's restless energy. He radiated a power that was equal to Naruto's in every measurable way. But it was a sterile power. A silent, Perfect, horrifying power. Who? What are you? Tsunade demanded, her shock quickly turning to aggression. The being's gaze swept over the room, dismissing the cage and the captains as one might dismiss furniture. His eyes finally settled on Naruto, and for the first time, he spoke. His voice was a perfect, harmonious echo of Naruto's own, but stripped of all warmth and inflection. I am that which you were meant to be, the being stated. I am the balance made manifest. The resolution to the equation. You may call me Kyoku. An agent of the Arbiter, Yoruichi breathed, stepping in front of Naruto, her body coiled like a spring. The Arbiter is a system. I am its solution, Kyoku corrected calmly. This universe has developed a sickness. An aberrant fusion of incompatible realities. You, he said, looking directly at Naruto, are the focal point of the infection. Your chaotic, sentimental nature accelerates the decay. The Raikage let out a roar of fury and launched himself across the table, his body crackling with his lightning release armor. Insolent creature. Kyoku didn't move, he simply raised a hand. A perfect, miniature sphere of white energy, a truth-seeking orb refined to its most absolute state, appeared and met the Raikage's fist. There was no explosion. The Raikage's legendary armor, his chakra, and his momentum were simply nullified. He was thrown back, landing in a heap, not physically harmed but utterly drained, his lightning extinguished. Emotion is a flaw, Kyoku stated, his hand returning to his side. It leads to irrational actions. Wasteful expenditures of energy. The path to true peace, the balance the Arbiter seeks, is the elimination of such chaotic variables. Naruto stepped forward, his own golden aura flaring to life, a stark contrast to Kyoku's sterile white. Peace without feeling isn't peace. It's just nothing. Precisely, Kyoku agreed, a faint, chillingly placid smile on his face. It is the perfect state. The end of struggle, the end of pain, the Hokage you always dreamed of being, a pillar that could bear all the a turd of the world, could only truly exist if he felt none of it himself. I am that pillar. I am that perfect Hokage. The ideological attack was as potent as any physical blow. Kyoku was weaponizing Naruto's own lifelong dream against him. Let me show you, Kyoku said. He vanished. A split second later, he reappeared in front of Kakashi. Before Byakuya or any of the others could react, he placed a hand on Kakashi's forehead. You carry so much regret, Kyoku said, his voice laced with something like synthetic pity. Obito, Rin, your father, your teacher, these attachments have brought you nothing but suffering. Allow me to free you. Kakashi's eyes went wide, then glazed over. The deep, familiar sorrow that always lived in his gaze vanished, replaced by a calm, empty placidity. Kakashi-sensei, Naruto yelled, his voice raw with panic. He lunged, crossing the room in an instant, his fist cocked back. Kyoku released Kakashi, who simply stood there, serene and unresponsive, and met Naruto's attack. Their fists collided. A shockwave of pure, silent force erupted, not of sound, but of warring philosophies. The pocket dimension groaned, the very air seeming to warp and tear around the two beings. The fight began, and it was a horrifying mirror match. For every Rasengan Naruto formed, a swirling sphere of golden, life-filled energy, Kyoku would form a perfectly silent, perfectly controlled orb of white that negated it completely. When Naruto used his divine speed, Kyoku matched it, his movements economical and flawless where Naruto's were instinctual and explosive. But the true battle was in Kyoku's words. You fight to protect him, Kyoku stated calmly, effortlessly deflecting a blow from one of Naruto's tails. But what are you protecting? A collection of painful memories that impede his judgment. A flawed man. My way offers him true salvation. The other leaders tried to intervene. Sui Feng attacked with her deadly Shunko, a vortex of wind and Kido. Kyoku simply raised a barrier that absorbed her attack completely. Byakuya unleashed Senbon Sakura Kageyoshi, a billion tiny blades. Kyoku waved a hand, and the blades turned to harmless white light before they could reach him. He wasn't just defending, he was proving their irrelevance. This was a battle on a plane they couldn't touch. Your friends are a liability, Kyoku continued, his cold eyes locked on Naruto's. You worry for them. You fear for them. That fear makes you hesitate. It makes you weak. A true guardian has no such attachments. Naruto grit his teeth, forcing down the doubt that was coiling in his gut. But Kyoku's logic was insidious. Echoing the Arbiter's vision, he looked at Kakashi's empty face, and a sliver of fear pierced his heart. What if he's right? His hesitation cost him. Kyoku found an opening, a flicker of uncertainty, and struck. A palm strike to Naruto's chest sent him flying back. He landed hard, the golden light of his tails flickering. He wasn't physically injured, but his spirit was. Yoruichi was a blur of motion. She appeared at Kyoku's side, her leg sweeping in a powerful arc aimed at his head. "You talk too much," she snarled. Kyoku caught her ankle with casual ease, his grip like iron. "The Flash Goddess, Yoruichi Shihoin, your defining trait is a desire for freedom. A chaotic, selfish impulse that leads you to abandon duty and responsibility. You are the embodiment of the chaos he must shed." He flung her away, but as he did, she twisted in midair, pushing off his own arm to propel herself towards Naruto. She landed beside him, helping him to his feet. "Don't listen to that walking instruction manual," she hissed, her voice low and fierce. "He's trying to get in your head. The fight isn't out there, it's in here." She tapped his chest. "But Kakashi-sensei," Naruto started. "He's not dead. It's a trick, a mind game," she insisted. "He's fighting you with your own doubts. So stop doubting." Kyoku watched them, his head tilted. "Attachment. See how it distracts you. How it creates a weakness. The Arbiter's calculations are flawless. To save this universe, your emotional core must be erased." He then turned his placid gaze fully on Yoruichi. "She is your greatest liability. Your deepest, most irrational attachment." He disappeared. Naruto's senses screamed. He wasn't targeting him. He was targeting Yoruichi. Kyoku reappeared behind her, his hand shaped into a blade, aimed at the back of her neck. He wasn't moving with extreme speed, he was simply there. There was no time to dodge. No time to block. All of Naruto's internal conflict, all the philosophical debate, came to a screeching halt. The cosmic scale of the war, the fate of the worlds, the Arbiter's grand design, all of it vanished, shrinking down to a single, terrifying point. Yoruichi was about to die. And in that moment of absolute, horrifying clarity, Naruto found his answer. Logic be damned. A roar, primal and furious, tore from his throat. It was not the roar of a god, but of a man protecting what he loved. The golden energy around him exploded outward, no longer serene, but a raging, incandescent star. He moved faster than he ever had before, breaking a barrier in his own mind. His speed fueled not by calculation but by pure, desperate love. He appeared between Kyoku and Yoruichi, his back to her, catching the piercing hand blade in his own palm. It didn't stop. It sank deep into his flesh. The white, sterile energy attempting to unmake him from the inside out. He ignored the searing pain. He looked over his shoulder at Yoruichi, his blue and gold eyes blazing with an emotion that was raw, fierce, and undeniable. "I love you," he said, the words a battlefield vow, a declaration of defiance against the cold, empty universe Kyoku represented. Yoruichi's eyes widened, her heart hammering against her ribs. In the face of oblivion, surrounded by gods and monsters, the simplest and most profound truth had been spoken. A fearless, dazzling smile broke across her face. "Took you long enough, you idiot," she said, her own voice thick with emotion. Naruto turned back to Kyoku, whose placid expression finally showed a flicker of something new, confusion. His attack, which should have been absolute, was being held. The wound in Naruto's hand was closing, the golden energy of his life force actively warring against the white anti-energy and winning. "Love is not a liability," Naruto said, his voice a low, dangerous growl. He squeezed his hand, shattering the energy of Kyoku's attack. "It is not a flaw in the system. It's not a variable to be eliminated." He pushed forward, forcing Kyoku back. "It's the whole point." He finally understood. The Arbiter and Kyoku saw emotion as chaos, a deviation from a perfect, orderly state. But they were wrong. Emotion wasn't the opposite of order. It was the source of a higher, more complex, more meaningful order. It was the will to create, to protect, to build. His power wasn't just a fusion of mortal and spiritual energy. It was a fusion of power and love. That was the true balance. His golden aura changed. It became richer, Deeper, infused with a new warmth. He wasn't just a powerhouse anymore, he was a living, breathing concept. A refutation of the Arbiter's entire philosophy. He didn't need to overpower Kyoku. He just needed to prove him wrong. He reached out, not with a fist, but with an open palm, and touched Kyoku's chest. He didn't push. He didn't blast. He shared. He flooded the empty vessel with everything it claimed was a weakness. His love for Yoruichi, his grief for Jiraiya, his bond with Kurama, his fierce, stubborn desire to protect the flawed, beautiful, messy world he called home. He showed him the pain, the joy, the struggle, the triumph. Kyoku staggered back, his body flickering violently. For the first time, an expression crossed his face: agony. He was a being of pure logic being force-fed the beautiful, terrible chaos of a human heart. Irrational, illogical, data, he stammered. His form destabilizing. The white light of his tails turned to static. This does not compute. That's because it's not for computing, Naruto said softly. It's for feeling. With a final, silent scream that was felt rather than heard, Kyoku dissolved. He did not explode. He unraveled, his white, sterile energy breaking apart and fading away, unable to maintain its form in the face of such an overwhelming, contradictory truth. The hall was silent again. Kakashi blinked, the life returning to his eyes as he shook his head, looking around in confusion. The other leaders, who had been mere spectators to a war of gods, were staring at Naruto with a new, profound sense of awe and a little bit of fear. They had not just seen a victory. They had witnessed the birth of a new philosophy, proven in the crucible of combat. Naruto stood breathing heavily, the wound in his hand completely healed. He turned to Yoruichi. The chaos of battle was over, but the air between them cracked. Clad with the aftershock of their confession, she walked up to him, her usual smirk gone, replaced by a soft, genuine smile. She reached up and gently touched the whisker marks on his cheek. "So," she said, her voice a low purr. "Now what?" Quote. He covered her hand with his own, his heart settling into a new, steady rhythm. He had faced his own doubts and won. He knew who he was. He knew what he was fighting for. "Now," he said, his eyes never leaving hers, "we teach the universe a new song. Together." Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. The Divine Battlefield. The echo of Kyoku's dissolution hung in the air, a silence more profound than any sound. The leaders in the council hall, beings who had commanded armies and decided the fates of nations, were utterly still. They had just witnessed a battle of gods. A war of ideals fought and won not by superior force, but by a concept they had long dismissed as a weakness: love. It was Kazuki Urahara who finally moved, snapping his fan shut with a sharp clack that broke the spell. "Well, that was certainly educational," he said, his lazy smile firmly back in place, though his eyes held a new, razor-sharp intensity. "It seems the enemy has shown us his weakness." Shikamaru Nara, who had been brought in with the Konoha delegation and had remained silent throughout the entire ordeal, stepped forward from the shadows. His usual slouch was gone, replaced by a focused, predatory stillness. "It's not a weakness. It's a blind spot," he corrected, his mind already dissecting the battle with terrifying clarity. "It's a being of pure logic. It can't comprehend an illogical variable." Kyoku was defeated because Naruto overloaded its processing capacity with an emotional paradox. "So, what's the plan, genius?" The Raikage grumbled, getting to his feet and ubbing his chest where Kyoku's power had struck him. He was humbled, but his aggression was already re-channeling into a desire for action. "We can't all go around falling in love with the enemy." "No," Shikamaru agreed, his gaze flicking to Naruto and Yoruichi. "They are the only ones who can deliver the final blow. They are the paradox. Our job," he said, turning to the assembled warriors, "is to clear the way. To hold back the tide of logic long enough for the illogical to do its work. It's a cosmic-scale decoy operation." Urahara's grin widened. A shield and a spear. How beautifully simple. The strategy coalesced with a speed born of desperation. The combined forces of the Shinobi Alliance and the Gote 13, on standby in their respective worlds, would be the shield. Their objective was not victory, but survival. They would defend the fabric of their reality against the Arbiter's agents, buying time. Naruto and Yoruichi were the spear. They would use the opening to push directly to the Arbiter's conceptual core, the nexus of its power, and perform the act of cosmic integration Naruto had described. Before they could finalize the logistics, the world dropped away. There was no sense of movement, only a jarring, instantaneous transition. One moment they were in Urahara's pocket dimension, the next, they were standing on an infinite, featureless white plane marked with a faint, glowing grid that stretched to a horizon that didn't exist. Above them was not a sky, but a white void. The air was sterile, holding no scent, no temperature. They were not alone. Arrayed behind them, pulled from their worlds in the same instant, were thousands of shinobi and hundreds of shinigami, the bulk of their fighting forces. In front of them, materializing from the white nothingness, was an army unlike any they had ever seen. They were not soldiers of flesh or spirit. They were concepts given form. Towering geometric constructs of black crystal, like the hounds but on a far grander scale, pulsed with the power of unmaking. Floating arrays of interconnected, glowing rings moved in perfect, silent formations, emitting a frequency that frayed the edges of jutsu. Winged beings made not of feathers but of pure, sharp-edged law, their faces blank and serene, wielded lances of solidified order. This was the Arbiter's immune system, unleashed in full. And in the far distance, at the heart of the white plane, pulsed a star. A colossal sphere of pure, blinding white light, the source of all this sterile perfection. The Arbiter's core. It seems the debate is over, Shunsui Kyoraku said, his hand already on the hilt of his twin blades. The final act has begun. There was no war cry. There was no grand speech. There was only the silent, inexorable advance of two impossible armies. Go, Kakashi said to Naruto. His gaze firm. The empty placidity Kyoku had forced upon him was gone, replaced by a deep, unwavering trust. We'll make you an opening. The battle began. It was a clash of chaos and order. A Kaiden fireball from an Uchiha clansman would roar towards a crystalline monolith, only to be deconstructed into heat and light a few feet from its target. A Shinigami's Bakugo spell would latch onto a winged seraph of order, only for the spell's own formula to be logically unwound and rendered inert. But the allies adapted. They were not fighting a predictable enemy, they were fighting the rules themselves. Shikamaru, standing beside Urahara on a hastily created command platform of hardened sand, courtesy of Gaara, began calling out new tactics. Don't use single-element attacks. They're too easy to analyze. Combine them. Overload their logic. A shinobi from the hidden cloud loosed a bolt of lightning. A shinobi from the mist immediately enveloped it in a thick, water-based jutsu. The resulting electrified torrent wasn't a simple technique anymore, it was a chaotic, unpredictable phenomenon. It slammed into a geometric construct, and for the first time, the sea. Crystalline surface cracked and shattered. A new cry went up, one of hope. The rules could be bent. The battlefield became a canvas of desperate, brilliant improvisation. Gaara's sand rose in colossal, shifting walls, not to block, but to reshape the terrain, forcing the Arbiter's rigid formations to break apart. Kenpachi Zaraki, laughing like a madman, used these shifting walls as springboards, his raw, unthinking spiritual pressure the one thing the logical constructs seemed unable to properly nullify. He wasn't using technique, he was a force of pure, irrational rage, and it was working. Baya, Kuya Kuchiki stood back to back with his old rival from the Chunin exams, Kakashi Hatake. Their movements are perfect, Byakuya noted, his Senbon Sakura swirling around them in a defensive vortex. There are no openings. Then we make one, Kakashi replied. He focused his Mangekyo Sharingan on a towering seraph as it prepared to unleash a wave of nullifying energy. Kamui, a distortion in space appeared not on the seraph itself, but directly in the path of its attack. The wave of energy was warped, shunted sideways, and slammed into another group of the Arbiter's forces, causing them to flicker and dissolve. It was an act of spatial misdirection the Arbiter's linear logic hadn't anticipated. In the split second of chaos that followed, Byakuya's command was absolute. Senkei. Senbon Sakura Kajiyoshi. 1,000 glowing pink swords formed and descended, not on the seraph, but on the destabilized ground beneath it, shattering its footing and causing it to collapse. Amidst this grand chaos, the spear began its advance. Naruto and Yoruichi moved as a single entity. The tide of the Arbiter's forces parted before them, a golden whirlwind against a sea of white. 3 on the left, there. Attack pattern is a triangular suppression field. Yoruichi called out, her senses analyzing the battle with blinding speed. Naruto didn't need to reply. He stomped his foot, and a wave of golden energy shot across the gridded floor. The ground itself warped, a section of the plane rising up to intercept the suppression field. The construct's perfect geometry was thrown into disarray. In that instant, Yoruichi was gone. She appeared in the midst of the 3 constructs, her body cloaked in the screaming vortex of her ultimate technique. Shunko. Raijin Senkei. She didn't just strike them. Shish. Became a contained storm of lightning and Ryutsu, dismantling them from the inside out before their logic could even register her as a threat. They moved on, a seamless dance of creation and destruction. Naruto was the artist, reshaping the very laws of the battlefield. He would see a phalanx of seraphs preparing a volley of conceptual lances and wave his hand, causing the space before them to fold, making their perfectly aimed attack strike their own lines. Yoruichi was the blade, the executor. She moved within the impossible openings he created, her every blow a precise, devastating strike. Against the weak points his divine perception revealed to her. Their movements were not coordinated by words, but by the bond they shared, an intuitive, perfect synergy born from absolute trust. AF. Lash of violet lightning and black flame tore through a formation of constructs to their right. Sasuke Uchiha had arrived, his Susanoo blazing. He said nothing, his eyes fixed on the distant white star. A silent declaration that he would not be left behind in a battle for the fate of reality. He fought alone, a whirlwind of deadly efficiency, his path paralleling theirs but never joining. At one point, a wave of nullifying energy nearly overwhelmed a medical camp where Sakura was desperately trying to heal a wounded Shinigami. A perfect, Susanoo-clad arrow of Amaterasu intercepted it, the black K flames warring with and neutralizing the white energy. Sakura looked up, saw the violet giant for a fleeting moment, and a small, determined smile touched her lips before she returned to her work. The shield was holding, but it was costing them. Shinobi and Shinigami fell, not dead, but erased, fading from existence with a soft shimmer. The sight spurred the survivors to fight with even greater ferocity. Tsunade and the 4th Raikage performed a combination attack, a lightning-fast lariat infused with monstrous, chakra-enhanced strength, that shattered a construct the size of a mountain. The old rivalries were burning away, reforged into a desperate camaraderie. As Naruto and Yoruichi drew closer to the core, the resistance intensified. The Arbiter was adapting, learning. It began sending entities that were designed specifically to counter them. A being of pure silence materialized before them, attempting to negate the resonant power of Naruto's creative will. But Yoruichi, moving faster than the concept of sound itself, struck it from a dozen angles at once, shattering it before it could establish its field. They pushed through, closer and closer, the light of the central star now blindingly intense. They were less than a mile away when their path was blocked for the final time. It rose from the white plain, a titan of flawless, white gold light, vaguely humanoid but 30 stories tall. It had no face, only a smooth, perfect surface. It wielded a sword that seemed to cut not through space, but through possibility itself, erasing potential futures with every swing. This was not just a soldier. It was a guardian, the final law, the ultimate expression of the Arbiter's mandate to maintain separation. Naruto and Yoruichi came to a halt before it, the raging battle of their allies a distant, muted roar behind them. The sheer pressure emanating from the guardian was enough to make the very dimension around it buckle. Naruto looked at Yoruichi, his face grim but his eyes blazing with resolve. She met his gaze, and in the face of this impossible, conceptual god, she gave him her signature, fearless grin. "Just another bully on a playground," she said, cracking her knuckles. He smiled back, a genuine, warm smile that was a beacon of defiance in this sterile, white world. "Ready for one last dance?" "Always," she replied. They charged, the Fox God and the Flash Goddess. The spear of a dying world aimed at the heart of an unwavering law. The fate of two realities rested on the battle about to be waged at the foot of a silent, white star. Chapter 8 End.